Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, welcome to Moms in the Middle, everybody.
Yeah, welcome. Hope everyone
Welcome,
is
welcome.
having a wonderful day so far.
I know it's so beautiful here in Kansas City the last 2 weeks after
Mm-hmm.
our winter freeze. It's been just so
I know.
gorgeous. It makes my mood. I love the winter, but I do also love just the sun shining when I'm working is so nice.
Yeah, it definitely makes a difference in your mood and energy and
I feel like
all
my
the
kids are
things.
so much happier when they can go outside.
Oh, yeah, 100%. My kids have asked to
Mm-hmm.
go outside every day, we get
Yeah.
home. And I
Yeah.
love being outside, but um, my daughter's still just dangerous all the
Mm-hmm.
time. I mean,
Yeah.
my son has his moments too, but feel like I still have to be up, kind of helping her on the playground and all the things.
Yes,
But
yes. Do you guys have a swing set, like a playground?
hmm yeah, we put it in
Okay.
last summer.
See, that would be
Yeah.
stressful for me with Dessy at his age, like Brinley is, because I'm
hmm
like, we just have the fenced in yard. And so, I will just do yoga on the porch or just hang out, and they can just run around the whole yard
hmm
without any parameters. There's nothing that they can't climb or kill themselves on or whatever. But yeah, so that would stress me out. Alda will climb the tree now, but she's old enough that she can go up and come down. So
Yeah. Well, and our kids got to meet for the first time and they had so
I
much fun
know. Oh
playing.
my gosh, they were so cute. Alda was like, "Do you think I'll ever be able to see him again?" I was like, "Maybe. I'm sure you will."
It was so cute. On the way there, I was obviously telling my both kids that we were gonna meet them and their names and
Mm-hmm.
everything. And Brax was like, "Well, what am I gonna ask her?" And I was like,
Oh.
"I don't know. Whatever you want to ask her." And he's like, "I just don't know yet."
Aw, that's so cute. Yeah, they had completely ignored each other. So we hosted a walk with our current and past clients, just like a mom walk at the park this weekend. And anyways, the first half of the walk, they completely ignored each other. But
Yeah.
then I finally was like, Alda, you should ask Brax to do what was it? Climb the tree. I think
Yeah.
started their friendship,
hmm
and then yeah, then they hung out after that. So.
It was so cute. So
They
cute.
were
They had a
they were
blast.
so cute. Yeah,
They had a
they did. We'll
blast.
definitely do it again soon. Which our next meetup will be prenatal yoga for our clients, and we've
hmm
had quite a few signups for that. So that has been really fun. I'm excited.
I'm
We
excited for
will
that one.
we can do the prenatal yoga even though we're not pregnant, and it will be
Yes.
lovely.
It'll still be great. We'll probably have an easier time. We will have an easier time
Yes.
than
With
everyone
everyone with
else.
their bellies in the way, but it's good. I feel like the mom walk attracted so many of our postpartum clients, our past clients, but
Yeah.
then the prenatal yoga one, so many of our first time moms are signing up for they're so excited, I think, to do
hmm
prenatal yoga together and stuff and everything. So
Yeah.
it's going to be
Yeah.
really fun, but it's also Valentine's Day. Have you guys been doing anything or preparing anything? I mean, I have my son's birthday, so that's kind of overshining everything.
Yeah.
Have you been done
This month
much?
is just super busy because, well, obviously the Super Bowl, you know,
Oh my gosh. I totally
and
forgot. Oh my gosh. Yeah. My dad texted me yesterday, what are you guys doing for the Super Bowl? I was like, I guess having you guys over. He's like, well, you don't sound too excited about it. I'm not. It's Desi's birthday this week. So I'm just kind of sure, you guys can come over. I just assumed you would.
yeah, yeah. So we're preparing for everyone that's been coming over during the playoffs to come over for the Super Bowl because,
Oh, so
they
you guys
have
are
to.
hosting a party.
Yes, so every weekend we have one friend that comes over, and then throughout the playoffs, it always ends up building. But
They multiply. They're
if you
just
show up during the playoffs and we win, you have to show up for every game after that.
That's the rule.
It's the rule. And so now, we have quite a few people. I mean, it's mostly family, but coming over for the Super Bowl. So I was like out and about this morning thinking like, okay, I need to start preparing like food and snacks and what that's going to look like. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, daycare is having a Super Bowl party.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, so I signed up, for something for that. And then my birthday's this weekend. Also,
Your
Dessy and I
birthday's
share
this
a birthday
weekend?
month. Yes, Saturday.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Well, happy birthday, Ellie.
thanks, thanks. It's not a big one, but we are going out to dinner with friends.
Yeah,
So
it's like when you're an
just
adult, it's like you only really celebrate the big ones. It's like everything.
yeah. So, so that's coming up this weekend. And then it's Valentine's week. And so we have
Mm-hmm.
like the daycare has Valentine's Day parties, and the kids happen to have picture day the same week. And it's just a lot of things in the next 2
That
weeks.
is a lot. Oh my gosh, does your daycare do all the kids bring in Valentines to pass out?
Well, yeah, I don't know if the younger classes do. Like Brax's pre-K class will do that, and they're like doing Valentine's Day boxes and all the things.
Oh yeah, yeah, for like the cards to go into.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
realize that he was supposed to have a box, and like obviously he doesn't need it yet, but
Yeah, but
that
you have to
we
make
were
it
supposed
and
to make
everything.
one. So I'm gonna give him the option, but I did find that Walmart had these little like tin mailboxes, and they're like all different like characters. So I did pick one
Mm-hmm.
of those up,
That's a good idea.
just in case we don't get something made.
Yeah. Do you and your husband, are you guys big like Valentine celebrators?
No, my husband really honestly does not love holidays at all.
Okay. Not like
He
a let's
doesn't
make it a
love
big thing.
no, and he does not love like giving gifts. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
we usually just celebrate my birthday and
Because it's right there. It's like, that's what I was going to say. We don't really
yeah.
celebrate either because both of our birthdays are the month before.
Mm-hmm.
And then Christmas is the month before that. So it's like,
Right.
and our anniversary is the 2 days after Christmas. So it's like, by
Yeah.
the time Valentine's Day comes around, it's like, we're out of money. We're out
We've celebrated all the things. We are done.
And
Yeah.
now with a February baby, it's like, with your kids, like you have to, it's a lot of money to like host the parties and get the gifts and like everything. And so it's just kind of like, we don't usually, we had like one really special Valentine. So the year that we got married, 2014, I came down to Kansas City. We were long distance at the time. I was still in Pennsylvania, and I came to Kansas City for Valentine's Day, and we
Okay.
had so much fun. And like we went, it was my first time on the plaza, and we snuck into this fancy hotel and had like drinks in the lobby, and it was like so much fun. And so now sometimes we're just like, oh, let's just go downtown and have dinner or something, because it's kind of like
Yeah.
remembrance of like where the first time I was at I visited Kansas City and stuff. And so so I think this year we have kind of the time and capacity. So we're trying to figure out my parents babysitting the kids one night so we can just go out to dinner. We won't go out like on Valentine's Day though, because
Oh
that's
gosh.
stupid to me. So
It's so hard. It's hard. Like even for my birthday, like when we do like want to plan something or like it's almost impossible. You have to plan way far in advance.
I know.
Or just expect to wait forever if you go anywhere. It's just
totally.
Do you do anything for the kids? Like, do you do anything like
I never really have. Like my mom has always like given them like a little like bag of candy or like something. And so I never really did anything. But this year it just got the best of me. And because we bought Dessy for his birthday. We bought him a nugget couch, which is expensive. So like that was kind of like all he really got was like a nugget couch. But then I was like in Target and I was like looking at all the cute little Valentine stuff. And so it kind of like got the best of me if I bought like a few little things. But I just got them a few little like shared things. Like I got them this little like these wooden hearts to paint. And I got them, my daughter really like, she doesn't have a hard time going to school anymore, but she is just such a homebody and always is like, I miss my mom and my brother when I'm at school and like everything. So I remembered when I nannied, there was one of the little girls I nannied was a lot like that, like just had a hard time with like separation. And they had the book, The Invisible String.
Yeah.
And she like it really helped her a lot. And so I saw it at Target in their Valentine's Day section. So I got that for them. And I got them like these little rubber ducks that had like hearts on them. I don't know. They were just in the dollar section of Target and were cute. And then I got them two like of the just little like healthy like the healthier candies, like the Smart Sweets or whatever. And I think I'm just gonna make like just like a little basket for them for the morning of Valentine's Day, but nothing special, nothing like really out there or anything.
Yeah, I'm on the exact same page. I was thinking about that. I don't even remember, honestly. Like, I know there was a year that I like kind of went all out. I made like a special Valentine's Day breakfast. Like, it obviously was on the weekend. A Valentine's Day breakfast and
obviously.
like cinnamon rolls and like, you know, with pink icing. And then we did little gifts and whatever. And that was before Brentley was born. I don't remember doing anything last year, honestly. But this year, I think I'm going to do something similar, like a couple of books, just a little basket for them to have like a little fun with, maybe a little treat, and call it good.
That's what I kind of thought, honestly, because it's like, is it on a weekend? No, it's right after the weekend.
Wednesday.
I was like, honestly, sometimes the days that I'm home, it's like, and that's not a day I'm home, but like the days that they're home, it's nice to have a few little activities to do to make the day special, and it kind of like takes up the day, you know, of like having a little art thing to do and some new books or like whatever. So I was like, oh, that'll be fun. They'll just have like some little things to play with and do on that day.
Yeah, so exciting. Okay, so it's Dessy's birthday this week.
Yeah, he's turning 2.
If you've been listening to the show, you know that we have started celebrating our kids' birthdays by sharing their birth stories. So Heidi gets to tell us all about Dessy's birth story.
I know.
Off the cuff.
I know. I didn't plan much, but honestly, guys, this isn't going to be a long episode because it was a very short birth.
It was. So before we dive into your birth, start by telling us a little bit about like kind of like the end of your pregnancy and maybe how it differed this time than the first time around.
Yeah, that's actually a really good conversation. So we were really lucky to get pregnant very quickly with all of our kids. And we decided we were okay, I think we're ready to have a second and all that. And we tried, and I got pregnant successfully, like our first try again. And then it was just this really weird pregnancy loss. I took a pregnancy test and was pregnant, but it was like very, very light. And I was like, you know, compared to just my first pregnancy and the gestational, you know, age that I think the baby is and everything, like it shouldn't be this light. So I kept taking pregnancy tests. Like I know especially as a doula, like any positive is a positive. And like I called my midwife and she's like, that's a positive. So like it's a positive, you know, you're pregnant. But I just never felt like super attached to the pregnancy. I never felt like it was real. I just honestly felt like sus about the whole thing from the beginning. And that's like, I know that's like really casual to like talk about it that way and stuff, but I honestly just felt weird from the beginning. Like, and so I had scheduled, since I felt so weird and I called my midwife, she was like, you know, if you want to schedule to come in to just get blood work done, to like, you know, I'm not concerned or whatever, like we'll just, you know, we'll do your normal scan at 7 weeks, like come in for your first appointment and everything. But if you want to come in earlier to get blood work done, like if it's just going to make you feel better, like let's go ahead. So literally the day that I was planning to go get blood work done, it was like, I was technically like 5.5 weeks pregnant. I started bleeding, and I was just like, honestly, and I don't really share this story a lot because a lot of people don't have similar feelings towards like their pregnancy loss. And so I don't want people, you know, now that there's been a lot of time since it, like I don't want people to think like I didn't care about like the baby or anything like that. I just honestly feel like there wasn't those like hormones there telling me that I was pregnant that were there to support the pregnancy, because I just didn't feel the way towards that pregnancy as I did my like 2 pregnancies that turned out to be, you know, full term babies. Yeah. And so I don't want to undermine like people who lost babies at between 5 to 6 weeks of, oh, it doesn't matter because it was so early, or it was, you know, wasn't that difficult or whatever, because that's not true. Like you can have whatever emotions or feelings that you have going through it, and everybody's experience is so different. And like I knew I didn't get a chance to learn anything about that pregnancy, to learn if like anything was wrong or anything. But like I have just a gut feeling that something was just wrong from the start, and it was never going
Mm-hmm.
to be like a baby, you know, like
Yeah.
the whole entire pregnancy. So for whatever reason, like I still had a little bit of an HCG spike. I got those positive pregnancy tests. And then by the time like I was bleeding, I got some blood work done, and my midwife was just so amazing at like making sure that I still got closure of like making sure I got my blood work done and like saw my HCG go to 0 and like be like, okay, like this is closure, like kind of thing around it.
Mm-hmm.
And she really encouraged me to just, she was like, you know, with an early pregnancy loss, um, you can try again, like right away. Like you don't have to like wait at all or anything. And so while I'm so glad that we like tried again right away, I also don't think it was the best decision for my mental health in like the grand scheme of things. So like I was sad, but I was like fine with
Mm-hmm.
the pregnancy loss. And then I immediately I had the pregnancy loss and then ovulated again 2 weeks later, like a normal cycle, and then got pregnant that cycle with Desmond. So, just within a month, losing a pregnancy and finding out you're pregnant again is like a lot in a month. And I
Mm-hmm.
felt like while I was fine during the like early pregnancy loss, I wasn't fine once I found that I was pregnant again, because like I did have those like strong hormones and feelings of attachment immediately towards Desmond's pregnancy, and like all those feelings of all like the things that came from the loss, it's almost like all that grief transferred onto his pregnancy instead of me like processing it and then getting pregnant again. It was like I was just so scared that like something was going to go wrong with this pregnancy, because I just felt so immediately attached to Dessy and just so like confident about the pregnancy. I was just so scared, especially as a doula. Like, you know how many people lose babies at
Yeah.
not 5 or 6 weeks, but 12 weeks and 15 weeks and late term pregnancy losses and like stuff like that, that I was just like so scared and anxious the whole entire pregnancy about losing that pregnancy. So that kind of leads into just the whole pregnancy as a whole. One, I was so sick Desmond's pregnancy. Like I wasn't like morning sick the whole entire time, but it was like I was just nauseous and just like not myself the whole entire pregnancy. Like I just felt like sickly. Honestly,
Mm-hmm.
how I describe it is like Bella in in Twilight, when she's carrying a vampire baby and she's being like eaten alive by the vampire baby sucking her blood. That is how I felt my whole entire pregnancy with Desmond. I was like literally, my stomach just kept getting bigger, and like my arms and my thighs and everything just kept getting like smaller. It felt like he was like eating me alive. I felt so sick. And I didn't like throw up. I didn't get like super nauseous, but I had really bad food aversions. Like with Alda, it was like I had, if I ate a lot, I felt okay. And with him, it was like I couldn't stop. Like everything just tasted and felt bad on my stomach. So like I didn't want to eat a lot. And like my body just gave everything like to like my baby,
To
because I
him.
wasn't
Yeah.
eating. Because I wasn't eating and I wasn't feeling good and stuff. And so that was really difficult. And then on top of just the physically feeling unwell, I had really bad perinatal anxiety. And honestly looking back, and like I didn't have this realization until I came out of it, I really think I had perinatal depression, because like when I look back, it just feels like there was like a ginormous cloud, like black cloud over me at all times. And it's like all like literally my memories of being like any memory of my like Alda or an event I went to, or a birth I was at, or working, or of my pregnancy, it's like it's all like shrouded in this like dream cloud that like isn't real. Like it's like a black
Mm-hmm.
area of my life. It's so weird. And that's like I've never had, like I've always been a more anxious person, but I've never had like depression or like any sort of like down feelings before. So that's just, I mean, I feel like I can relate so much now to people who struggle with depression. I can't imagine dealing with that on like a normal basis and it not being something that lifts at like 9 at once you give birth.
Yeah.
Um But I honestly, for a long time, I mean, now I'm 2 years out, I had to mourn a lot of that period of my life because I felt like I missed out on like 9 months of Alda's life, honestly, is what it was. Of like I look back at like pictures from that time and I like don't remember doing those things
Mm-hmm.
with her, or like I don't remember feeling it. Honestly, I'm gonna cry. It makes me so sad, like when I look back at
Yeah.
pictures and I see her like smiling at me and I just like know that I wasn't feeling like any happiness in those moments.
Yeah.
And anyways, it's just really, really sad to think about. And I've come to like terms with it now, but immediately postpartum with Desmond, which we'll talk about once I actually even get to pregnancy and the birth story. So maybe this will be a long podcast episode. Sorry, guys. So after, once I felt better and I like realized how bad I got during Desmond's pregnancy and how like deep I was in that hole, um I had to mourn that for a long time, of like that time that I missed with her. And I'm so glad that like it didn't transfer onto my postpartum experience and that I felt better after giving birth, because it gave me so much more empathy for like our clients and the people that we interact with who go through postpartum depression, because I can't imagine having that feeling towards your baby's first year, and like you can never get those like moments back. And I just understand it so much more now. I'm not glad that I had to go through it, but I'm so much more like understanding of what it means to like go through a perinatal or postpartum depression and such. And so
Yeah.
anyway, so that was my pregnancy, is that I don't really remember it and just remember feeling like I was being eaten alive. And then and so once we get closer to birth, the last few weeks of my pregnancy, I had prodromal labor like I did with Alda. So it started a little bit earlier with him. But I also gave birth like a little bit less than a week earlier with him. And I feel like the prodromal labor started about a week earlier with him. So like around 35 to 36 weeks was when I just started again. If you listen to Alda's birth story, it was like the on and off contractions every night of like, I'd start contracting every night. And then like, I just like wouldn't sleep, and then eventually they would just like stop and dwindle out, and I'd fall asleep, and then I'd wake up with like still not being in labor the next morning.
It's
So
so
that's
rough.
I know. It's just
Oh.
like you're so exhausted physically, mentally, everything. And so that started pretty early on. I actually even had an episode, I think it was like 36 and a half to 37 weeks, where I even called my parents over because they were so intense. Like I was breathing through them. And as someone who had given birth unmedicated before, I'm like, I know what contractions feel like. And so
Mm-hmm.
they were getting really intense and like ramping up, and I was having to start breathing through them. I was like on the birth ball breathing through them. So I was like, let me call my parents over and everything, because it was starting to get late. So I was like, why don't they just sleep over? And they came over and slept over, and then like they stopped actually shortly after they got there. I think them like getting there kind of interrupted them, which it was never going to be real labor if it stops when somebody shows
Yeah.
up and all that stuff. But it was really frustrating and really discouraging. And every single night would be like all over again. Like, we're starting contractions. Okay, I'm not in labor. We're starting contractions. Okay, I'm not in labor. All the way to about 38 weeks was the first time I asked to get a cervical check. Because again, with my first pregnancy, I had prodromal labor, and it dilated me to about 3 centimeters before I went into labor with her at 40 weeks. And with having the history of having a fast birth, her birth was 6 hours from start to finish. I was curious if the same pattern was repeating itself. I thought that it was with having prodromal labor, but I wanted to know, like, am I walking around at 4 centimeters? Because like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be too far away from the hospital. I don't want to be driving. I was driving my Alda to my mom's and back for childcare on the days that I was working. So I was like, I don't really want to be like 30 minutes away from the hospital and like go into labor, because it started so suddenly with Alda and then was like immediately intense, that I was just like really worried about being like out and about with
Yeah.
Alda when that happened. Like I was really anxious about it.
Yeah,
So
it's
I
like
got to start.
it's like your early labor like was just like prolonged, and then it's like bam, you're
Yes,
in active labor.
that's exactly what it is. Is like literally, it's like I get all of early labor out of the way, and then just
Mm-hmm.
like go into labor, and it's just like active labor, and then I'm done. Like,
Yeah.
which is nice, but it also it's like there's good and bad things about it, right? Of like I have very quick painful active labor phases, but I'm like in labor for like weeks before labor start, before I have a baby. So yeah, so anyway, so at 38 weeks, I got a cervical check and I was around like 3 centimeters dilated. And me and Katie, my midwife, we chatted for a while about like if I should get a membrane sweep or not. And I was so miserable. And I was like, honestly, like go in there and like see, like feel around. And I was
in there a little bit and see what's
I
going
never
on.
got one with Alda, but I was like pretty confident now in my body's ability to go into labor. Like if my water broke or something, which is the main risk I worry about with a membrane sweep, is it accidentally breaking your water and then you not going into labor and having to get an induction. And so that was the main thing I was concerned about, because I just did not want an induction because I didn't want to be on monitors 24/7. That's literally the only reason I didn't want an induction. I was like, I do not want Pitocin because I don't want to be on monitors. Like that's literally the only reason. So I was like, go back in there, feel around, and be like, if you think that like my water bag is tight, and you think, and she's my midwife from Alda's birth moved away in this time period, and so I was seeing another midwife in her practice who I had also seen during Alda's pregnancy, and she is very experienced. She's like, I don't know, in her 40s or 50s, like, has been doing this for a long time. So I was like, I trust that, I will not hate you if you accidentally break my water, but I trust your ability to like make somewhat of an assessment. And I was like, if you think that, my water bag isn't like right there about to pop or bulging or anything, then like go ahead and do a membrane sweep. And she went in and she was like, yeah, I don't feel like it's like, it's not bulging, or like I'm not really that concerned about it. I really feel like I can kind of get around it. So she went and did a membrane sweep. And honestly, I regret it because it just made my contractions so much worse, but didn't lead to labor. And so I still was in prodromal labor, and it picked everything up and made everything more painful for like 2 days. It was like more painful, more intense, couldn't sleep, but it never actually sent me into full-blown labor. So the next week I showed up again at my appointment, and she's so sweet. Like midwives are more hands-off, and I was starting to get worried about Dessy's size because Alda was 8 pounds 10 ounces, and this was a boy, and I felt way bigger. And they say second time moms are pretty good at predicting their baby's weight, their baby's weight after having one baby. I was like, this is going to be a big baby. And so I was like, I wasn't going to get induced because of that, because I felt, and my midwife was like so sweet at being like, you have a proven pelvis of like the fact that you had like an 8 pound 10 ounce baby so easily and so quickly, like you can have any size baby, like easily, like you're going to be able to have any size baby your body makes. Like, don't stress about it. She was so sweet about it, but I was just so uncomfortable. Like from 36 weeks on, I felt like there was like a bowling ball sitting in my pelvis at all times. And he was literally at like 0 station. I was 3 centimeters. So I was just like dying. I couldn't walk. I couldn't get off the couch, anything. And so at 39 weeks, she was like, it's totally up to you, but like I'm more than happy to like have you come in tomorrow, and I could just break your water and we can just see like if you go into labor. And she was like, and then you won't have to have extra monitoring. You can just have intermittent monitoring or whatever. Unless of course you don't go into labor, then you will have to start, then you're on a clock and you're going to have to start Pitocin. She's like, I'd give you like 12 hours to like walk around and try things and see, if you can get your labor started. And I have high hopes that your labor will just start from that based on like where baby is and everything. But, it's up to you. And I like thought about it because I was like, of course, I was like, I just want to be done. But in the end, I know, in the end, again, I was just like, okay, I'm not even at my due date. If I get to my due date, and like at that point, it was just not worth it to me to potentially have to be on Pitocin and have to be monitored and like assume the risks of Pitocin for being pregnant another week. So like I really had to weigh it for a long time. I was like, if I get to 40 weeks and I still haven't had this baby and I still can't walk and I still can't get off the couch and I still feel like I'm dying, then like I probably am going to be open to this intervention. But at this point, it's just like the scales are not tipping for me. And that's why I just think it's so important to know so much about labor induction before you actually get an induction, because there are so many possibilities that you open yourself up to with an induction. It's like, it's not that induction is bad. It's that, like, I knew 90% chance I'm going to go in and get my water broken and my baby's just going to come out in 2 hours. Like, that's a 90% chance that's going to happen. But am I willing to assume the 10% chance of my water breaking, me not going into labor, then we're worried about signs of infection, then we're going to start Pitocin, then it's a couple more hours, and then, oh, I spike a fever, and then, oh, now I need a C-section. Like, I was just like, as a doula, I'm playing those scenarios all in my head. I'm like, it's a very small chance that that's going to be the scenario. But if it is, am I going to regret this choice? I was like, right now, I would regret that. And when I was like 40 to 41 weeks, I might not regret that as much. I might have been like, I feel more ready for this. And so as someone who has prodromal labor for a long time and everything like that, other people might not expect a baby between 40 to 41 weeks, but like I was expecting a baby before then after a month of this. So,
oh my gosh,
so I decided, I was like, I'm going to wait out one more week and then we'll talk about this at my next appointment, which was like a few days after 40 weeks, I think was my next appointment. So we chatted. She told me, she was like, Heidi, literally your bag of water is the only thing holding this baby's head off of your cervix. And once his head is applied evenly to your cervix, you are going to just fly since you had a 6-hour birth with your first, like, your birth is going to be 5 seconds long. So she was like, she's like, if your water breaks, I want you to go to the hospital. I want you to drop whatever you're doing. I don't want you to call the labor and delivery unit. I don't want you to call me. I just want you to get in the car and drive to the hospital. I was like, she's like, this baby's just, she's like, he's 0 station against your cervix. The only thing there is a little bag of water. So like, you need to just run to the hospital. And I was like, okay, fair. So I stayed very close to home that last week of pregnancy. And it was funny. So again, prodromal labor every night, having contractions, whatever. The night that I gave birth to him was the day before his due date, which has made it so hard to remember his birthday. I mean, now we remember it, but like the first couple weeks, because you know how you say the due date like over and over again in your brain, yeah. And so it was like he was literally born 14 minutes before his due date. So it was like I like kept saying the due date, then being like, no, that's not it. It's the other day. So the night before his due date, I started having contractions again, just like every other night. And honestly, they weren't even nearly as bad as some of the other nights that I've had contractions. Like I was just watching TV over them. I wasn't having to like get on my birth ball or breathe through them or go lay down or anything. I was just like, oh yeah, like I'm having contractions again, which like I had said literally every night for the last month. And Joe's just like, what else is new? But I still just felt the need to inform him every time because he couldn't feel what was happening. So it's just like, yeah, I was like, just so you know, Joe, like I'm having some contractions. And for some reason, Joe is not an intuitive person, like at all, like no offense, but he is not intuitive. And so for some reason, he was like, tonight's the night we're having a baby. I just know it. And like literally got up and started packing the hospital bag. I'm like literally barely having contractions and nothing's happening. Like I'm just like, oh, by the way, I'm having some tightening, whatever. And he was like, I don't know.
You were like breathing through them.
Yes, exactly. And I don't know why, like his like dad instincts took over and he was like, tonight's the night we're having a baby. I just know it. And so I'm going to prep. And then if we're not having one, like at least everything will be ready. So he literally starts packing the hospital bag, getting which we had most of it packed, but like getting all the last minute things in, everything. Alda had already gone to bed. I forget what time this was. Oh yeah, it was around 9 p.m. Alda was already in bed for the night, everything like that. Or no, I'm sorry. Timestamps are very important in precipitous birth, so I'm trying to remember. Yeah, it was.
Remember too.
Yeah, it was like 8:30. We have a few pictures that have helped me cement like the timetables in my head over the last 2 years. But yeah, it was around 8:30, and he even called my parents over. He was like, "Guys, Heidi's having the baby. Like anytime now, you need to come over." And I'm like, Joe, I'm fine. This is ridiculous. I literally was like yelling on the phone, don't come over. I'm fine. It's fine. And they did start packing up, like started packing their bags and stuff because they were like, Joe said Heidi's having the baby. I'm like, Mom, I'm fine. I'm not having the baby, whatever. I literally am like yelling at Joe, being like, stop being ridiculous, whatever. Get up to go to the bathroom, sit on the toilet, go to the bathroom. And then I'm like, why am I still peeing? Like nothing. I was
Why is it still coming?
like, you know, when you're just like, am I peeing or like, am I not? I don't know. It's just the baby pushing at my bladder. Anyways, so I was like, I thought at first I was just like peeing and just not realizing I was peeing still. And then I was like, okay, this is like gushing out and I'm definitely not peeing. And so I like stood up and literally like push, like my water had just burst all over the toilet, like all in the toilet, luckily, because it was so much water. I didn't have my water break until 10 centimeters with Alta, so I don't really remember like the feeling and the sensation of it, nor did I have to like sit in liquid my whole entire labor. But it was so gross. It was so much fluid. It was so yucky. And so I literally was just like semi squatting over the toilet, being like, Joe, my water broke. And he's like, I told you. And I'm like, you need to give me a pad because I can't do anything. I'm just like sitting here as like water is gushing out of me into the toilet. It was so gross. Oh my gosh. And so he got me like a pad and everything. And then we like called my parents. They're like, we're already on our way. And I was like, well, this was good that Joe hypothesized that I was going to have a baby tonight. And so
everyone else was on the same page, Heidi. You were just not.
I just wasn't, apparently. Desmond was, Joe was, my parents were. It's just apparently I didn't know. So I put on a pad, everything, started getting my last things together. My parents showed up like 10 minutes later. And so my water broke around like 8:45 to 9ish. They showed up, you know, a few minutes later and they were just like staring at me like, why aren't you at the hospital yet? I'm like, I was waiting for you to. So I'm just like talking to them because I wasn't having contractions yet any more than just like light contractions. So I was just like talking to them and like, oh yeah, like when Alta wakes up, this waiting for you. They're like, get to the hospital, because they had like heard like my midwife's pep talk about like you have to go right to the hospital. I was like, I'm fine. The hospital is 10 minutes away. I'm just sitting here. I'm obviously not like in full active labor. It's okay. So we got in the car, whatever, got to the hospital. We got to the hospital. I think it was almost exactly an hour after my water broke. So it was like by the time we were like at the hospital, went through the ER, got upstairs and everything, it was like 9:45-ish. And so we got to triage. You know, they wanted to check me to make sure my water broke. And I was like, well, I'm literally sitting in a pool of fluid. If you just lift up the sheet, you'll see that my water broke. And so they looked there like, oh yeah, your water broke. And then they checked me and I was 5 centimeters. And I had been having just like baby contractions. Like they kind of started to like kind of those little baby contractions kind of started to come. And the way that you can really tell contractions differently from prodromal labor is that they're more consistent. So like at that point, I don't think that they were necessarily stronger than some of the contractions I had had in the previous month, but they were just coming at very consistent intervals and lasting for a consistent amount of time each time. And so, and you get like the full relief in between of like relief and then, okay, there'll be a little contraction and it lasts for 30 seconds and it's gone kind of thing. So that was starting to kind of happen. So I was very confident my body was going to have this baby without like induction or anything after my water broke. And they checked me. I was 5 centimeters they hadn't gotten me a room yet. They were very busy that night. And they were like, they started to put my IV in, which actually is funny because it was this like really old nurse that I had said, like, she pretty much was like, what's your birth plan? I'm like, I pretty much want nothing. I don't want anybody touching, like, except for what has to happen. Like, you have to check the baby's heart rate, which if you listen to my first birth story, like I got intermittent auscultation with all of my kids, which was pretty much they just check baby's heart rate every like 20 to 30 minutes during a contraction, after a contraction. Instead of putting the monitors on you, they use like a fetal Doppler. And so I'd already gotten like my 20-minute strip and triage to like approve me for that. Like baby was doing good. I could get intermittent auscultation. So I was pretty much like, all I want to do is be in a tub and nobody touch me, nobody talk to me, and you can just check the baby when you need to or whatever. But like I don't want anybody talking to me. I don't want anybody touching me except for hip squeeze. Like I just want Joe to give me hip squeezes and I want to sit in a bathtub. Like that's all I want to do. And so they like came to draw blood and I was like, aren't you gonna put in an IV and then you can just draw the blood like when you're doing the IV or whatever? And they were like, well, you said you didn't want us touching you, so we weren't gonna give you an IV. And I was like, no, I still want an IV, like just in case of an emergency. But I guess I'd like freaked them out enough that I was like, I don't want anybody touching me. Nobody talking to me. They weren't even gonna put one in, and I was like, no, like I know there's emergencies that can happen. Like I want one in just in case, but just like, you know, put in a saline lock and like wrap it up so I can go in the water. Like I don't want to think about it, but just have it in just in case. And so they put in the IV. I got off the monitors and everything. And it was shortly after that cervical check, everything just started like up. It was like, you know, a race, the pistol fired when they did the cervical check and the race started. All of a sudden, oh. Okay.
Real. Things are getting real.
Things are getting real. I just kicked my microphone. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so it was like it started the whole labor when they did the cervical check, which can happen. Like cervical checks can kind of aggravate like the hormones and get contractions picked up and stuff. So contractions started like full force, like just like immediately. I have a picture of myself. It was an hour and a half before Dessy was born, so that was 9:15. Holding on the monitor in triage because they kept having a hard time finding his heart rate because he was so low with like they couldn't keep it on with the band. And so I was like, how much longer do you need a steady, consistent here, like, you know, trace of his heart rate for me to get off these monitors? And they're like, we need 5 more minutes. So I literally just like was sitting there holding on the monitor myself so that they could just be done because I was so sick of everybody touching me and trying to get his heart rate. So I was like, it was like a picture Joe took. I was like wearing a mask. It was still like COVID. So in triage, you had to wear a mask. And so I was like holding the monitor on and I was like at him. And I was like, that was the moment I started having the real contractions, and I was just like death glaring him in the picture, like, yay, I'm in labor. Like it was my first. I was like, yay, this is like real contractions. And so that was an hour and a half before everything started, and I really like. I told Joe, I was like, I don't care if people think that you're like an absent father. All I want is pictures of this birth. Like, I just want a couple pictures. Like, I didn't want like a birth photographer or anybody in my space just because I like a lot of reclusion. But I was just like, just a couple pictures because I didn't have any pictures of Alda's delivery. And so I was just like, just take a couple. So he took that picture and I was like, yeah, I'm in labor, whatever. And so, but it's helped with the timestamps a lot having the pictures. So shortly after that, they came to me and they were like, so we only have 2 rooms available. We have one room that's like nice and big and one of our newer rooms, but it only has a like it has a big walk-in shower, but it only has a shower. Then they're like, then we have this like really old small room that nobody ever uses. It's like way in the back of the maternity ward, but it does have a tub, not like a big jacuzzi tub, because I was in one of the midwifery rooms with Alda that had like the big jacuzzi tubs at research. But those rooms were taken. So they were just like, it just has like a little tub, but it has a tub. And I was like, I don't care what the room looks like. I just want to sit inside of a tub. So I'll go to the tub room. So we walked there in between contractions. I was having like every, you know, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes, like a strong contraction, having to stop and breathe through. And immediately they just left me there because they were like, okay, like your water just broke. You're not really in labor yet. Like, you know, they didn't know if I was in like labor or not yet. They were just like, we'll come check on you in 30 minutes when we have to do your next when we have to use the fetal Doppler next to check baby's heart rate. So they were just kind of like, get settled in, whatever, we'll see you in 30 minutes. So I'm like standing there, leaning over the bed. It's just me and Joe in the room and like having contractions. I'm like, Joe, fill up the tub like as fast as you can. Just like get the tub filled up. Cause it was just like coming like at one after another was like these like train running through my body contractions, like every single time, just like so intense. For like a minute long. And so Joe filled up the tub. I like immediately got in when it was just like up to like not barely even my waist. And I was sitting like on my butt with like my knees kind of to the side. I have pictures of this, and just like sat in the tub. And every single time I'd have a contraction, I would just like flip onto all fours and just like moo like a cow through the contraction. And that's one thing that I changed a lot when it came to my labor coping between my first unmedicated birth and my second unmedicated birth, was not being afraid of vocalization. My first birth,
Mm-hmm.
I was so like shy about it, as like I heard stories of people like their nurses telling them to be quiet or like something like that, that I was just like self-conscious about it. And so I never, and I don't think anybody really told me like what noises to make, like what, you know what I mean? Like what would be helpful and what wouldn't be helpful with my first
Mm-hmm.
birth. And now as a doula, like I knew that like low tones can really help your pelvic floor open up and keep yourself feeling like in control of the contraction. And so I immediately started utilizing that when my contractions first started in triage, was vocalization with low tones, which sounded like mooing, honestly.
Yeah.
But it was like the only thing, honestly, that really got me through and made me feel in control of a precipitous birth, because it was something I was focusing on that wasn't the contraction. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
like hyper focusing on the sound and the vibrations of me like mooing, and I kind of knew like how many breaths and moos I would do before like the end of the contraction.
You set like a cadence and like exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's the
for
little song
sure.
you're singing and you know the ending, and that it's gonna like come back down at the end. And so every single time I'd have a contraction, I would like flip onto all fours and start like mooing, and Joe would do a hip squeeze, and that's what I was doing in the tub. So shortly after I got in the tub, like not long after that, they came in to check Desi's heart rate for like the 30 minutes after that. And I was like, I need Zofran. I started to feel really nauseous, and I puked like 12 times with Alta's delivery. I don't know. I lost count, but I just kept, every contraction I would puke until they finally like were like, hey, do you want Zofran? I was like, yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
And so I started to feel nauseous. And at that point, the contractions, like when I got in the tub and like relaxed my body, the contractions started coming really close. So I started having double peaking contractions. So for those of you who don't know, that's pretty much when they go up, they come down, and then before they go all the way down and let up, they go back up into another peak and then back down. And so I started having double peaking contractions. Something that was so interesting about this labor is that I don't know if it was because it was so fast, or because I was a doula and was like logically thinking through my labor like I would be assessing somebody who I was like douulaing. It was really, I felt like I was almost in that role of, I was like assessing myself but also feeling all of it. And so I felt like so knowledgeable about what was happening every single step of the way, because I was feeling the things that I knew about and like knew about from an outside perspective, that I could like piece it all together to know exactly what was happening with my body at like every step of the way. And so when I started having the double peaking contractions, I was like, oh, I'm going through transition. And I started to get really hot and sweaty. And I asked Joe for cool wash rags, and he put like cool wash rags on me while I was like in the warm tub. And then I started to get really nauseous. And so like in my brain, I'm just like, oh, I'm going through transition. Like it was just so like, I was thinking about labor so logically, but it was really difficult in the sense of like, I never went into labor land. Like with Alda, I went into labor land where like time didn't exist and everything was just kind of swirling around me, and I wasn't really like in my body. With this one, with Dessy's, it was like I was so in my body the whole time.
You were
like
in your thinking brain the whole time. Yeah.
Yes, I wasn't in that like primal brain. And so it was harder to cope with, because the pain felt so much more real than when I was more in like the labor land primal spot. And so the contractions just felt so much more intense to me than my labor with Alda. And so I was very logically like, okay, I'm starting to feel nauseous. I'm going through transition. Last time I went through transition with Alda, which I didn't know was transition with Alda, but now looking back, I was like, that's when I was in transition. I puked a bunch, and I was like, honestly, it's taking every ounce of my energy to cope with these contractions, because they would double peak and then I would have a 30-second break, and then I get a normal one. So I'd get a double peaking, 30-second break, regular contraction, 30-second break, double peaking. And I know this not because anybody ever had a monitor hooked up to me, just because I was so in my brain the whole entire time that I literally was like counting and like knowing exactly. I was like, this is how long a 1 minute contraction is. This is how long this is a double peaking contraction. Like I was literally just like assessing myself. I didn't need monitors. And so I was writing out all these contractions, and then I was like, okay, I cannot take the time to puke or I will just lose my mind. Like if I have to take the time and energy to throw up, I'll lose any semblance of control I have over these contractions, which really the only control I had was like vocalizing through them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, Joe, call the nurse to get me Zofran. So he called the nurse. She brought in Zofran, and when she brought it in, that's when she checked his heart rate, which was the only time that he ended up having a heart rate check between triage and when he was born.
Mm-hmm.
So she checked his heart rate, and everything looked good. And so she was just like, oh yeah, like, look like you're in labor. That's good. You're not going to need Pitocin. I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely not going to need
Definitely not
Pitocin.
gonna need that.
And she was like, okay, like, here's your Zofran. And she pushed it through my IV, and she was like, I'll be back in 30 or 40 minutes to like check him again. Good luck, whatever. It was exactly what I wanted. Like, I know other people would see that and be like, oh my gosh, like, how did you, like, I would want my nurse to be way more hands-on. No, it's exactly what I wanted. I knew what I was doing. I knew how to cope with it. I did not want anybody like trying to coach me through it or anything, because I feel like that would have just been such an interruption. And that's why I think so many people don't understand what the role of like a nurse is in the birth space. And so like, if you want an unmedicated birth and you don't feel like you can know exactly how to coach yourself through the experience, which most people can't do, I think that's why doulas are so important, and especially, for all types of birth, but especially unmedicated birth, because it's really not the nurse's job to like sit and coach you through every contraction. Some have maybe the time or capacity to do that, or the education to do that, but that's definitely not something that should just be expected of whatever nurse. And I find lots of people don't realize that until they're having an unmedicated birth. They're like, I don't really remember the nurse being there. Yeah, because they just pop in and check on you and then they leave, because like that's not their job, is to like coach you through labor, like, so.
And at some point in labor, when you're unmedicated, like, you're uncoachable. Like, if you haven't prepared, if you haven't like kind of wrapped your head around what this potentially is going to be like, or could be like, and how to cope through things, and like learned coping, like, it's really hard to learn that in the moment and use it to its full
100%.
advantage.
And you know what? It's so easy as a doula to pick out your clients who want to go unmedicated, who will actually successfully go unmedicated. I mean, sometimes somebody surprises me, and I don't care if they go unmedicated or not, but it's the people, but you can tell the people who are very committed to it, educated about it, and have really mentally, not just like, oh, I want to have a Medicaid birth, I'm going to hire a doula. No, the ones who really take it as like a personal thing that they're like striving towards, and are training for it and preparing for it and mentally preparing for it. Those people tend to successfully have unmedicated births. And it's okay if you just are like, hey, I maybe want to try that, but I don't know if it's for me or not. But if you really, 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 for whatever reason, want to have an unmedicated birth, it is so important to really internalize the strategies so that you can cope with the pain and understand the pain, honestly, of like what's happening to your body at different points. So yeah. So I was in the tub. She gave me the Zofran. She checked baby's heart rate. She left. It was honestly just a couple contractions later, I was like, I feel like I have to push. I was like, I feel lots of pressure. I was like, every time I get on all fours for a contraction, I would start to like grunt at the top of my contraction, which as doulas, we know that's, you just kind of start doing that at the peak of contractions, kind of instinctually, once you're getting close to pushing. And I really was like, I felt like the fetal ejection reflex would happen at some point, and I was like, if I don't get out of this tub now, I'm never going to get out of this tub. Like, either I'm going to like, because at the hospital, they don't like you to have water bursts. I mean, if they accidentally happen, then that's one thing. But I literally was like, I mean, if I was not in a hospital and didn't want medical care, I would have just stayed in that tub and then just had a baby 20 minutes later. Like, that's what it just would have happened. But I was like, it's either now or never, of like, either I'm getting out of the tub and calling the people in the room and letting them know what's happening, or like a baby's just going to come out and we'll call them after. I was getting to that point where it was just kind of instinctively taking over, and it was just me and Joe in the room, and I was like, Joe, you need to call in the nurse, because they're going to be pretty mad at me if I just have a baby and then call them when it's done. That sounds like it's going to be a lot of paperwork. So I started getting that instinctual urge to push, got out of the tub as Joe was calling the nurse, walked back over to the bed and was just kind of like leaning over the bed. The nurse comes in and I was grunting at the peak of each contraction. This is really funny, but I was like, I have to pee and poop so badly, like both. Like I just felt like all the pressure of the baby down there. This like I needed that release, and I was like, if I go to the toilet, I'm just gonna pee and poop and then have a baby.
Can't
Like
have a
there's like,
baby.
and the thought of like sitting on a toilet with all that pressure felt unbearable. There's no way that I'm not just gonna push out the baby like at that moment.
There's
So
no
I
holding on
literally
at that point.
no, there was no holding on to anything. The only thing that was like keeping I felt like him in was me like standing up right there and not like leaning into like the urge to push. So I put a towel down and pee and pooped on the towel, like literally right there. Which I'm so glad this is probably only be moms listening to this, but like I say that to say that like I've had clients do things like that and we could literally care less. Do you know how many fluids and bodily stuff is coming out of you during birth? It's totally normal. And honestly, the more that you're scared of it and like hold it in, the worse your birth is going to be. Like you really have to be in a space, you know, with the people around you and the environment that you're in that you feel comfortable just like relaxing and just like following what your body needs, because that poop is going to come out either way. Like when I was pushing him out, when the baby's head is coming out, they push against your colon and everything is kind of like squeegeed out as they come out. So it was going to come out either way. And it was just honestly like exactly what I needed to feel more comfortable and to relieve some of that pressure and be able to just kind of like give in and just let him come out. And it was funny because the nurse was like, "Oh, thanks for putting down a towel before you did that." I was like, yeah. So anyways, pretty gross, but it happened. And then immediately after I got on all fours on the bed and I was like on all fours. And then I would like sit back and kneel between contractions. And so I was kind of starting to like push just kind of instinctively when my body wanted to each contraction. So I was still like leaning forward on all fours. And then just like as my body felt like it needed to push, I would push during the contraction. You know, when it didn't want to push, I didn't push, just kind of letting my body do its thing to bring baby down. And then I would lean back on my knees and then or like kneel back, and then I'd go forward again and then kneel back. And then the nurse was just like, again, older nurse, she meant well. I actually had a birth with her not too long ago. And I was like, "You were my nurse for my son's birth." And she was like, "Oh, really?" And she was like, "I thought you looked familiar." But I mean, she's like literally 70 years old and had been doing this for like 50 years, she told me. So like she's seen a lot of people before give birth. And so I showed her some pictures from my birth and she was like, "Oh, I remember you. You had the giant baby." I was like, "Yeah, that was me." So she was like, so I was starting to push on on all fours. She was just like charting on the computer and she was like, "Honey, you do not want to be pushing if you are not 10 centimeters. You know better than that." Like as a doula, like to me. Because she was just thinking like, "You've only been here an hour. You came in at 5 centimeters, but no contractions. Like, so, you know, it's all I'm sure you're only like 7 or 8 and not just feeling the urge, like baby's low, whatever." I'm like, "I'm not." I was like, "I'm 10 centimeters and I'm pushing this baby out. So you better get somebody in here to check if you want to know or not." If I'm 10 centimeters.
Yeah.
And so she called in the resident and the resident checked, like just, I don't even think I went on my back. I think she just kind of like checked and she was like, "Oh yeah, like you're 10 centimeters, like baby's right there." And so then they like got the doctor on the phone who was on call, because the midwives do swap call with the doctors and the group too, depending on who's on call that day. And it was a doctor on call. My midwife, actually, she's so sweet. But like, just since we have kind of like a personal relationship for me being a doula in the community and stuff, she lives pretty close to the hospital. And she was like, "You know, I know you have fast babies. So like, just call me if you don't like whoever's on call. Like if it's a doctor or something who's on call that you're like not super stoked about and you want like midwifery care, like just give me a call and I'll come by and like do your birth." But when I heard the doctor who was on call, I had done births with her before, and was like, "Oh, I'm more than comfortable with her like catching my baby." So I was fine with it. So the resident called the doctor, and the resident was like a first year resident, and she checked me, and like all I heard on the phone call with the doctor was like, I think the doctor must have asked what position I was in, and she was like, "She's on all fours." she said it in a way that I thought she wasn't going to be comfortable with delivering a baby on all fours, which as doulas, this hospital that I went to all my babies with, I've seen babies birthed in all different positions, and I know most providers are comfortable with that. But I didn't know if a first-year resident of the
Mm-hmm.
hospital was comfortable with that. Because I have seen as a doula providers who've been doing this for 20 years who say they don't know how to deliver a baby unless somebody is facing the
On
right
their,
way on their back. Yep.
yeah.
Yep. On their back. Or sometimes we can compromise with side lying. But they don't know how to do it backwards, as they would call it, of you turn backwards. And so I just in my head was like, if this resident tells me to get on my back, I will literally, I think I will like donkey kick her in the face. Like, and that's so horrible now. I'm like, that's so unlike me to like think that I would literally be violent like towards her. But it was so instinctively just like, I would literally, I think, kick this woman before I would get on my back because my body does not want to do that.
Oh
Like,
my gosh.
and I don't recommend that. Like, as a doula, I wouldn't recommend kicking somebody, but we can certainly advocate with words to have you do whatever you want.
Words are hard.
Yeah. And so the resident was there, the nurse was there, and unknown to me, my husband had showed them my birth plan. I hadn't pulled it out, anything. I just didn't really think of it because everything went so fast. And unbeknownst to me, he had pulled out my birth plan that said that like I didn't want any touch or anything during the second stage of labor, which is the stage that you're pushing. And so there's a lot of controversy around like perineal massage and perineal support and like all of the things. Personally, I don't want to say secondhand trauma, but maybe that's what it is. There's a wide variety of what providers consider perineal massage.
Yeah.
A very, very wide variety. I've seen lots of, especially like midwives, some like of the younger female OBs, very gentle stretching and
Mm-hmm.
touch, or just like pressure on the perineum to make sure
Mm-hmm.
baby's head doesn't come out too fast. That is one. I've also seen other people literally putting two hands inside of people's vaginas and tearing the tissue, like as they're
Mm-hmm.
massaging and aggravating it
Yeah.
and swelling it. So, as a doula who had seen all of those different variations, especially if it wasn't my midwife, I just felt like even if they were like barely touching me, I felt like I would be so worried about it, about
Mm-hmm.
like how aggressive they were being down there, that I wouldn't be listening to my body. I would just be like thinking about people touching me. And on the other hand, even if like, cause I did end up having a second degree tear with him, even if a second degree tear could have been prevented by people putting, cause his head came out very fast. So if they could have put pressure on my perineum to have his head come out slower, I mean, honestly, I just think the feeling of somebody touching me as I was pushing would have made my body like recoil. I just didn't want
Mm-hmm.
anybody touching me. I just don't like it. It doesn't feel instinctual to me if somebody's touching my vagina while I'm pushing out a baby. I just don't like it. And
Right.
so anyways, so it was kind of funny because like everybody was just doing everything that I wanted. And I was like, why does everybody know like what I want for my birth? But it was because Joe had told them.
Yeah.
But I didn't know at the time. And so I was just like, wow, everybody's just like falling in line.
That's so
So
funny.
it was funny. So she checked me. I was 10 centimeters, and they were just like, okay, like you can push now, and we're just gonna stand back. And so they were literally just like standing back against the wall, like they weren't next to me, anything. So it was just like me and Joe at the bed together, and he was still doing hip squeezes, or no, I think he had switched to, he was doing counter pressure on my sacrum while I was like pushing, because I just still needed like the counter pressure, and something to kind of push back on. I kind of like something to like push back on. So he was just doing that as I was pushing. And I pushed a few times on all fours, and I really felt like I would deliver my baby on all fours, because Aldo was a vacuum assisted delivery, and so I didn't really have the option. But I labored on all fours with her. I labored on all fours with him. So like instinctively, I just felt like I would have a baby on all fours. Like that's how I would be. But this is why it's so important to just like follow your body's lead, and especially in an unmedicated birth, have the just the environment and the people that help you just allow you to tap into your intuition and aren't like telling you what to do, because it's so important to listen to your body as you're giving birth. Especially like I gave birth to a very large baby, and I honestly feel like if I was in lithotomy on my back with an epidural, I would not have had such an easy delivery with such a big baby. And I know people do. I'm just saying, like, with my experience, I really don't think it would have been so easy if I hadn't been following like my body's intuition
Mm-hmm.
around like what position my body and my baby needed, like to make it happen. So I was feeling him kind of like coming lower as I was pushing on all fours. And then something about my body was just like, you need to be on all fours. Like, I didn't think about it, anything. It was just like my body, like on my side. So my body just
Mm-hmm.
like instinctively,
Instinctively.
instinctively, words are hard. And I said, this is going to be a short episode. We're at like a minute or an hour and 10.
I know.
I have a lot of words. My my body just like instinctively moved onto its side, and when I moved onto my side, this is literally like the coolest. It's like I honestly, I hate to like to give other moments not say they're number one, but it's one of the, I think it's like the number one coolest moment of my life, like the feeling, because I didn't get that with Alda, with having like a more rushed second stage
Mm-hmm.
of labor with her D cells and the vacuum delivery and everything, which you can listen to that story if you want to. But I felt his head pop through my pelvis into the birth canal. Like, it was just the coolest feeling in the world. I literally just felt his head just like pop, and then like he was in the birth canal. And when that happened, the fetal ejection reflex just like totally took over. Like, it was no
Mm-hmm.
longer me pushing, it was just my body pushing, and I was just like surviving the experience. So I was on my left side, and Joe was holding up my right leg and still putting pressure on my back too. And I only think it was 2, maybe 3 contractions, but pretty much every contraction, I would just like hold on to the side of the bed and like scream, and my body would just like push him out. And
Yeah.
so I think it was 1 or 2 contractions of that, and his head was crowning. And it was so weird because I didn't really have this like break in between contractions when with the pushing stage with Alda. It was so weird how like even though his head was crowning, like I literally got such a relief in between contractions. Like, I felt like
Mm-hmm.
a huge relief of, I was just like, oh, hello, like, how is everybody today, like, in between contractions, even though like I had this baby's head like crowning in between, like,
Yeah.
so so, and in my Joe says that in my head there was way more dialogue going on than was actually going on, because I'm like, I
Mm-hmm.
remember there being like a conversation around, do you want to touch his head, and me being like, yeah, that sounds great, like, and everything, and he was like, I think it was literally like, do you want to touch his head, and you were like, yeah, and like touched his head, and then went right back to like your head pose. Holding on. But in my head it was like a full-blown conversation. So
Yeah.
anyway, anyways, I, in between the contraction when his head started crowning, and then the contraction that he was born, they asked me if I wanted to feel his head, and I like was able to touch his head, and I remember saying like, he has no hair, because I thought he was gonna have hair, because Alda was very bald, and me and Joe both have like very thick dark hair, and I
Mm-hmm.
was born with a lot of hair. So I just always pictured me having like a hairy baby, of like a baby with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of hair.
Yeah.
And I had horrible heartburn with his pregnancy, or acid reflux, and heartburn, all of it, with his pregnancy that I didn't with Alda. And so anyways, so I like touched his head and was like, there's no hair, but that's okay, whatever. And then the next contraction hit, and again, like, Joe was just holding up my leg, and I grabbed the bedpost like I had done the other times, and just like screamed, and his whole head and body, everything just like flew out of me. And the resident, the doctor didn't make it in time, so the resident just like literally was like behind me and just kind of like pushed him forward, and I like just reached down and grabbed him, so I like got to pretty much catch him. So she like, I mean, I was like, there was like a little second between me like surviving that contraction and grabbing him, so she kind of like just was like, ooh,
Here you
here's
go.
him right here. And then I like got to pick him up and just like immediately bring him to my chest. And he started crying like right away. And it was just, oh my gosh, Joe immediately, when his body came out, started snapping pictures and caught the moment that I like pulled him up. And
Mm-hmm.
just see like the relief on my face. Like I just like laid my head back and was just like, oh my gosh, like it's over. And he was, we knew he was going to be our last baby. And I think one of the first things I said was like, I'm so glad I never have to do that again. I'm so glad, like how magical of an experience is. It's just such an enormous physical feat. And I was so glad to experience again. And also like Alda's birth went very smoothly until the end. But just have like the full experience of just an autonomous, untouched, unmedicated birth was one of the most like magical experience of my life. And I know some people will think that I'm crazy, but just feeling all of the feelings and the sensations and the baby like moving through my pelvis and moving through my birth canal was just one of like the coolest life experiences I will probably ever have. And I was just so grateful for it. And then also so glad that I never had to have another baby and never had to feel those types of contractions again in my life altogether. And so he immediately came to my chest. The doctor walked in like minutes after and was like, oh, you're done. Okay. Like we'll deliver your placenta. And so I don't know if I was having some extra bleeding. I asked for just to not have a managed third stage of labor unless they felt like I needed it. Which for those of you who aren't like in birth work, that means getting Pitocin during the third stage of labor, which is very common, usually a standard practice during in any hospital birth. But I was just like, I didn't need it with my first baby. And so I just was like, only if like you think, oh, she's bleeding a lot or anything like that, then give it to me. I don't know if I was having a lot of bleeding or if they were just being careful because precipitous births tend to have a higher risk of hemorrhage. So I don't know if they were just being careful or if I was having a lot of bleeding. I never really got too much information about that. But the doctor who I trusted and had delivered babies with before was like, I would recommend that you get a shot of Pitocin in your leg. So she didn't like hook me up to the continuous IV Pitocin, but she just did a shot of Pitocin in my leg. And in one of the pictures of me like holding Dessy, you can see the nurse like getting the whole syringe of pit and like everything. But yeah, so they did the shot in my leg. And I do have to say, I don't know if the afterbirth contractions, I know that they get worse with every baby, but the afterbirth contractions for him, the first couple hours were like labor contractions again. Like they were so, so bad. And they felt so different than my first baby, like the afterbirth contractions. So again, I'm not sure if it's second baby stuff or if it was getting the Pitocin post-delivery. But they were, I was like curling my toes and like trying not like breathing through them every single time I would get one. And when I latched Desmond for the first couple times, it was like literally it was like labor pains again. So
that was my experience too.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Did you have Pitocin?
I did.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like, I don't know if it's, if I had a third baby and I didn't have pit, if I would know, but I know they get worse every baby too.
I feel like they were even like once the pit had like been stopped and all of that, like I felt like it was still.
Yeah. And since I just had the shot and I didn't have like the continuous pit drip too, I was like, it couldn't have stayed in my system very long, like just getting that one little shot. So anyways, interesting to me, but they were horrible. My second baby. I know lots of people use after ease, but I'm allergic to a lot of the things in after ease, so I didn't get them. But I know a lot of people swear by after ease. I did take like ibuprofen, Tylenol and stuff and everything. But yeah, so the doctor came in, she delivered my placenta pretty quickly. She called it a 1.5 degree tear. She's like, it's barely a second degree, like just into the second degree territory. I felt like it was pretty similar to my regular second degree with Alta. I feel like healing was a little bit easier, but I don't know if it's just because, you're a second time mom and you know what to expect and everything. I didn't really have any lasting issues from either of my babies. A second degree tear usually doesn't cause any sort of like lasting dysfunction or anything. It's usually just kind of that initial recovery. But I did have just a lot of issues with my pelvic floor after, and my pelvic floor PT was like, none of this is from delivery. It's all from carrying a 10-pound baby. So I guess I didn't get into that yet. So when he was first born, I was like, oh, he's not that big, because I thought he was going to be humongous. Like I thought he was going to be like I felt like 9 to 9.5 pounds. Like after having an 8.5 pound baby, I was like 9 to 9.5 feels like that's pretty big. And he was so much taller than Alda that his weight was just distributed a lot more evenly, because Alda came out looking so chunky, and he
Uh-huh.
looked chunky too, but I didn't realize he had 2 additional inches on him than Alda. And 2 inches for a baby is a
Yeah.
lot more length. So when he came out, I was like, oh, he's not even that much bigger than Alda, like whatever. Like, I wonder why the pregnancy was so hard or
Oh my
whatever.
gosh.
And then they weighed him, and he was 9 pounds 14 ounces, so only 2 ounces away from 10 pounds. And yeah, that made a lot more sense after that. He was taller, his head was bigger, everything. I mean, the birth was so easy. I couldn't have asked for an easier birth. It's funny too, since he came out so fast, like his head was pretty much like perfectly round. It wasn't like coned or anything. He looks like the perfect little baby. I kept joking. I was like, did you guys switch like a 2-month-old with my baby? Because he was like so sturdy and just like had such good head control and was so big. I was just like, did you guys just like swap a 2-month-old out, like when
Yeah.
when you passed him to me?
So did he have any bruising or anything like that from how fast birth was?
He didn't. He honestly looked like a little perfect C-section baby. It was wild.
That is wild. Yeah.
I mean, he
Yeah.
was a little swollen. Like every baby
Mm-hmm.
kind of is a little swollen, like the swollen lips and the swollen nose when they first come out. Other than that, no. Like I have pictures from the next morning. So he was born at 11:45. So my water broke around 8:45, and then I started laboring a little bit after 10. So it was
Mm-hmm.
about an hour and a half from my first contraction to him being born. And no, it was very, he looked great for he didn't look too traumatized. And yeah, so I have pictures at like 7 a.m. or something. I took some pictures to send to my mom like the next morning, and he looks great. So it's just,
That's
it's
awesome.
crazy to me. Yeah. And so,
That
yeah,
is
so they weighed
crazy.
him. They measured him, everything. He was doing great. I did great. We got a little bit of rest. I can never sleep after giving birth. Like everybody's like, okay, swaddle up. Okay, you nursed, swaddle up your baby, take a nap. It's 3 a.m, take a nap. And I'm just like staring at him, like wide awake, like the adrenaline's just like
Yes.
pulsing through my system. And so I really couldn't sleep until the next day. I got some naps in. When Joe was like upholding him and stuff like that, I took some naps. But honestly, like breastfeeding went so well. Like he just latched immediately. I just think like he was great, but also it was just like that first time mom confidence of just knowing like
Mm-hmm.
immediately after birth. Like I didn't need to ask the nurse or lactation consultant. I was just like, poop, here you go, boob,
Yeah.
like just got him right on. And he just, yeah, he did amazing. Postpartum was, honestly, it was literally like immediately after the birth, like an hour or two after he was born, after I was done getting my skin to skin, I like got up to go to the bathroom and like everything. I was literally like, I literally feel like just a fog has been lifted from me, like with the perinatal anxiety and
Mm-hmm.
depression. It was literally like immediate. And that is just so wild. Like it was just so immediate to me of just like, wow, that was a really shitty 9 months. Like literally like immediately after of
Yeah.
like, that was really bad. And even my mom said when I got home from the hospital, she's like, I 100% noticed a difference the moment you got home from the hospital. You were just like smiling and giddy and like your normal Heidi self versus like the last 9 months that
Mm-hmm.
we've been through of
Mm-hmm.
dealing with your mood swings and your horribleness. And
Oh.
so yeah, it was just so crazy. And like literally immediately, like the next morning when I was ordering something for breakfast, I was like, food sounds good again for like the
Yeah.
first time in 9 months. Like it was just so wild how it just like 360 like right away of just like, whoop, okay, like now you have a baby and everything is fine.
Mm-hmm.
And so the immediate postpartum was honestly great with him, and so was just all of postpartum with him. I mean, I just felt so much more confident. I mean, there was still the lack of sleep and the sore nipples and like,
Yeah.
little things like that. And adjusting to like being a mom of two. But just in
Mm-hmm.
general, like I just felt so much more confident nursing him and baby wearing him and getting things done around the house with him. And I really felt like I recovered, while it was like a year or two of recovery from just the whole carrying a 10-pound baby and having a 10-pound baby and like
Yeah.
all this stuff of like rehabbing like my muscles and everything, because I didn't really work out during my pregnancy. mentally and just physically, I felt so much lighter after. He still is in like the 90th plus percentile, but his first 6 weeks of life, he gained 6 pounds every week of his life. So he was 16 pounds at my 6 week midwifery visit. And
Oh my goodness.
I had popped a stitch from baby wearing him around. And they, I just kept hearing people being like, well, don't I went to the midwife at like 4 weeks because my stitch had like broken and they were trying to decide if they should stitch it again or not. And they decided not to, and it healed fine. But they were like, well, don't carry anything bigger than your baby. And I'm like, well, my baby is 14 pounds right now. So like double the size of a newborn. So there's not much I can do. Like my husband's back at work. I got to put him in the baby carrier and like walk around with him while I'm taking care of my toddler. So I probably not purposely, but I overdid it in the immediate postpartum period and then needed to rehab some of the damage that was done from like baby wearing him around when he was so big, but it was just, a life necessity, and I'm all put back together now. So
yeah,
2 years postpartum. Pelvic floor PT is amazing.
Yeah.
Highly recommend. So yeah, I know we've been doing this really long, but I don't think there's anything that I missed. I hope I got it all.
Yeah, that's so awesome. It's so cool to hear because obviously, like, I've known bits and pieces of it.
Yeah.
But I haven't gotten to hear the whole thing start to finish. So cool.
Yeah. And I'm so excited, like your kids' birthdays are finally going to be coming up soon. And so I'm so excited to hear your stories.
Yeah, next month will be Brenly's birth story. So
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Which
It'll
is
be really
similar in a lot of ways. So
I know, but I'm so excited to hear all the little details and everything too. So thanks you guys for listening. How are we celebrating?
Yeah.
We're just gonna, so since we bought him like the nugget and stuff and he's only 2, we decided to not do a big birthday party because we're like, he doesn't care. He doesn't know, like, he's like, oh, I met these people once or twice in my life, but whatever, like if you have all your friends and everything over. So we're just having like our best friends, like our 2 best friends who have kids and who have kids around the same age, and my parents over for pizza and cake one on the night of his birthday. And I was like, he's just gonna love that so much more of just being with just the people that he loves. And we got some little trucks to put on top of the cake, and I'm just gonna make them myself, and I'm gonna have them like scooping sprinkles, like the sprinkles are the dirt that they're scooping. And so anyways, I'm just gonna make a little cake and we're gonna order pizza, and he loves pizza. Every single time we say we're having pizza, he goes, party because one time somebody said a pizza, like, oh, we're having a pizza party, and so now he thinks that whenever you have pizza it's a party, so he's like, party.
That's so cute.
We're gonna get some pizza and just do cake and just have like a chill day celebrating him. I'll be home that day from work unless anybody goes into labor, so it'll be fun. But yeah, I just realized my birth story was almost as long as my whole entire birth.
Oh my gosh, that's true. That's true.
I got all the details because it took just as long.
That's crazy. That's funny. Well, it couldn't be more perfect. So
to think, guys, you could have had a baby in the time that you listened to this whole podcast.
Pretty crazy to think about it that way.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, thanks everybody for listening, and thanks Elly for listening too. I enjoyed chatting about it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing it. So good. So we will see you all next week.
Yep. Bye guys.
Bye.